Most construction companies don't collapse because they're badly run. They collapse because one major contract disappears and the numbers just don't stack up anymore. And when HMRC is owed serious amounts of money, panic decisions are what destroy directors personally. Now, I want to run you through a real life scenario, a construction company that we've recently supported. They basically lost a major contract and it was pretty much out of nowhere. And at the time, they owed $700,000 to HMRC, they owed about $500,000 to suppliers and subbies, and they both had overdrawn directors' loan accounts, okay? Now, it wasn't a small company, it was a fairly serious operation, it had been going for 20 years. Now, they come to us, sort of the normal line, Chris, what's it going to cost us? Very focused on what the cost of liquidation was. And I said to them, lads, I said, listen, the big problem for you isn't the cost of what this is going to put it into liquidation. It's your director's loan accounts I want to talk to you about. Now, the scary part is they literally nearly appointed another firm and they found us over on Trustpilot. And I said to them, have you already discussed about these overdrawn loans accounts? And they said, nobody has ever mentioned them. So listen on to the rest of this video and I'm going to tell you how we helped them not totally dodge all the raindrops on this one, but we got them the best outcome they could have hoped for. Now, let me tell you a bit about the business. Obviously, it's a construction business, mainly worked on site, did big commercial jobs, and it's always had a strong order book. You know, they've had times where they've been struggling with HMRC. I mean, if you're in construction, you'll probably know a lot of you guys and girls, you lose money going on site, sometimes lose money coming off site, but the idea is you make enough money in the middle to keep your business going. So these guys had long-standing clients, regular contracts. They were experienced directors. They didn't just set up in 2020 and had a go at things. There was literally decades of trading behind them. But like a lot of construction businesses, they relied heavily on one major contract. I mean, they did odds and sods, but it was almost the deal. Whereas this one customer says, listen, if you put everything in with us, if you give us what we need, we'll give you all the work. And what went wrong is that contract was lost. Wasn't delayed, wasn't reduced. It literally was lost overnight. The company that they worked with for all these years had a change of management. And the problem is, as you guys well know, is when things like that happen overnight, your overheads don't just stop. Your wages don't stop. HMRC doesn't wait. And your cash flow collapses almost overnight. Now, the debt position, sort of first thing we did is reviewed the numbers, okay? HMRC was just over £700,000. Trade suppliers and subbies around $500,000. So total debt level, we're talking about 1.2 million. Now, you're probably thinking there, oh my gosh, this is a huge amount of debt, and it's all relative. Listen, this firm in the past has been behind with HMRC for similar numbers, and they've always negotiated time to pay arrangements and got out of the mess. I know it's not, you shouldn't really do this, but I know there's people out there that are watching the video that may strategically miss VAT quarters, maybe a couple of VAT quarters, because you're seasonal or you're a construction business and you know that if you can just get through the next 6 months, you've got a big job starting or you've got some retentions that are going to drop in, okay? But when we dug into it with this business, it just was not recoverable through trading. And the reason it wasn't recoverable is their biggest contract has gone. And because they put all their eggs in one basket on this big contract, yes, they did smaller jobs, but they were sort of out the game for winning other work. They were out the game for tendering for other decent contracts. And because of that, the only option actually was to look at an insolvency process. Because, listen, they were insolvent, they couldn't pay the debts when they fall due, the liabilities were more than their assets. But the killer question for this business is, have you got any realistic hope that you will ever get back on an even keel. And one of the directors, he wanted to keep on trading, you know, and borrow more money to keep going. And I'm like, no. I says, honestly, like, you are making a big mistake there. Now, obviously the business needed to go through an insolvency process. That was undeniable. The hidden problem, the hidden problem before I spoke to them, it wasn't just the headline debts. Like, they both had overdrawn directors' loan accounts. Now, each director had overdrawn loan accounts of around 50,000, okay? And the balances had built up over the previous 2 years. And why was this? It's because they'd taken dividends out of the company and the company couldn't afford to pay them. And this is where a lot of directors fall down. You know, we're told to take salary and dividends. Salary maybe £1,000 a month, top it up with a dividend every month. But what people don't realise is you can only take a dividend when your company's profitable. The fact that these guys owed £700,000 to the HMRC showed they definitely weren't profitable in this last year. And the key question that I get asked, you know, almost immediately, as soon as we saw these directors' loan accounts, I'm like, okay, has anyone discussed this with you properly? Because I want to know whether you understand what I'm talking about. Has your bloody coffee machine always goes off when we're filming? I said, has your accountant mentioned this to you? And obviously these guys just got year-end accounts, so any conversation that they had with their accountant was about a snapshot of their business 12 months ago, about as much use as a chocolate tea cosy. And I said, has this other firm mentioned it to you? Another insolvency firm? And the truth is, they hadn't, you know. So if I can see them, everyone else can see them. And all I'm saying to people is, listen, you might not even like me. You might not like four-eyed bold chaps from the north. But you want to speak to a firm, if you've got a problem like this, who's willing to have these conversations with you. Now, if anything I've said so far has hit a nerve or you want more information, go down to the comment section. At the top, there's a link. If you put in your details there, one of my team will call you today. We're over 700 reviews on Trustpilot. We're the #1 on Trustpilot, and we offer free, independent and impartial advice of how directors get from A to B legally. Okay? Now back to the problem for these directors, these overdrawn loan accounts. Now that's personal exposure. An overdrawn director's loan account does not disappear in a liquidation, it crystallises. And they can follow you around for years. Now, where we work a bit differently, okay, this is what Director First does differently to almost everyone. Before we ask you to make any decisions, before we make any promises, we basically go through everything with you. We go through the various insolvency options and the non-insolvency options. And we also look where there are personal issues, okay? And one of the things that we help you understand is your director's loan account. Now, it's not to spook you. It's not for you to kick the can down the road. I just believe you should know what your problems are before you make a decision. So you're making a decision on everything. And again, this business had no other hope. It needed to go through an insolvency process. But I can't live with myself leading someone into an insolvency process, knowing that they've also got a £50,000 bill we're going to chase them for once the insolvency practitioner has been appointed. So what I do is I just get everything out on the table. And I said, right, you've both got 50 grand overdrawn director's loan accounts. I need full disclosure off you. If you tell me everything about your personal situation, I've been doing this a long time, and I will give you a good idea of what type of settlement may be accepted by the insolvency practitioner. And again, everything's in principle at this stage because there's no insolvency practitioner appointed. Obviously, an insolvency practitioner has to do all the relevant checks to come to any type of decision on a settlement. But I said, right, what are your properties worth? You know, what's the mortgages on your property? What's your income? What's your expenditure? What's your realistic affordability? Because this is what you've got to really understand as a director, okay? Is okay, you might owe money on an overdrawn director's loan account, and then insolvency practitioner's duty bound to try and recover that money from you. That is their job, okay? But they've also got to look at it through a commercial lens as well. And there's generally grounds for some type of reduction, sometimes type of settlement on a director's loan account, as long as that settlement is in the interest of creditors. And what I'm actually saying is a settlement from a director, perhaps a reduced settlement, is that a better realisation than the insolvency practitioner will get if they force the director down a bankruptcy route? Just a critical bit here, I just want to hammer this home. No deal on a director's loan account can ever be agreed before an insolvency practitioner is appointed, okay? You can, though, get a very decent indication of what's likely to be accepted if you do full disclosure early with us, okay? And that's exactly what we did with this firm. So we tried to plan the outcome as best we can. Once we understood the business wasn't viable, once we understood the personal exposure, and once we understood what the director's real net worth positions are, we could start to go to work. Anyway, first step is, in and amongst all these problems, you might have heard me say that they had a bit of smaller work, smaller contracts knocking about. So there was something in this business that had some value, and they had some plant and machinery and a few vehicles. So we instructed an independent agent to value the business assets. Wasn't guesswork, it's all done properly, okay? The directors set up a new company with a completely different name, so they didn't get hit by the Section 216 prohibited name problem. Remember, if you're going to go through an insolvency process, you are going to be prohibited from using a same or similar name for a period of 3 years, okay? That is called Section 216. There are 3 normal ways around this. Way 1 is you already have a company, limited company with the same or similar name that is already trading, and it has been trading for over 12 months. So if you've incorporated a company with the same or similar name over 12 months ago, but it's not been trading, that does not circumnavigate Section 216. You can also apply to court to appeal to a judge as to why this name doesn't contravene Section 216. You might be into 5 or 8 grand legal costs there, and the judge may not give you what you want. The best and easiest way to deal with this is to buy the goodwill and brand from the insolvency practitioner. You buy it off them on the day they get appointed, and that's outlined in the valuation. There'll be a figure for goodwill. And if you buy the brand name for the figure that the agent states, you've then got to advertise the fact that you've bought it in the London or the Edinburgh Gazette for our friends north of the border, and you've got a right to creditors and stakeholders to let them know that you've done it, okay? But in this case, it wasn't needed. They had a totally separate name, okay? And then they had an honest conversation with the smallest clients, and they explained the situation honestly. All the clients knew that this big company had had a change of management, and all but one of them said that they wanted to work with them in the future, okay? And they'd move any work in progress across, okay? So that was a decent result. Obviously, in addition to this, some of these vehicles had finance on them. So we put them in touch with one of our extended team who assisted with refinancing some of the vehicles and basically moving them into the new company. Now, let's get to the important part, the sale of these assets. Because what these guys did, it's a pre-pack. They basically set up a new company. They got everything valued. They spoke to all their clients, and they moved the good bits of that insolvent company sideways to a new company. And the sale of the business assets was agreed at £45,000 payable over 6 months. And when I say it was agreed, the agent who had valued work in progress databases, plant and machinery, tools, vehicles, goodwill of the company, they said that he believed that it would be worth around 50,000 in situ and 25,000 ex situ. Okay, and what that means is he believes it's worth to the directors 50,000, but if he took it and sold it all at auction, he'd get 25,000. So there was a bit of toing and froing, and the agent agreed to write a letter of recommendation of 45,000. So they raised an invoice from the insolvent company to the new co, and they transferred everything over. They also had conversations with the insolvency practitioner, who agreed that they could pay this 45,000 over 6 months. Okay, so it was open, it was transparent. The first job the insolvency practitioner is going to do once they get appointed is check that any assets out that have been moved out of the business sideways, they have been paid for at a market value. Okay, now next thing I want to touch about is about these directors' loan accounts. Okay, and this is where speed and accuracy mattered. Okay, we worked quickly with our existing accountant to basically get a final set of accounts done properly, like a final statement of affairs. And this was a really important detail, because what we wanted to try and do was assess all these directors' loan accounts that were at £50,000 at the start, based on their balance sheet, were the accurate. Now, neither director had taken a salary for 6 months, so these unpaid salaries were offset against the director's loans, and that reduced each DLA from 50 down to around £40,000 each. Okay, now the final outcome on the director's loan accounts, based on full personal disclosure, available equity, affordability and realism, okay, the insolvency practitioner, once appointed, agreed that a full and final settlement of £15,000 per director would be accepted over 6 months. And this was exactly the range that we had indicated pre-appointment. Now, again, an important reminder, only an appointed licensed insolvency practitioner can agree a DLA settlement. But a good advisor can ensure that you're not walking in there blind. So what's the final outcome of all of this? Let's look at the full picture. There was £1.2 million worth of company debt we dealt with properly. Okay, HMRC were handled through a formal process. Sadly, the suppliers won't get anything back. A lot of them will be insured against the debt. The directors were not made personally bankrupt. Directors' loan accounts were settled at 30p in the pound. And the business continued in a new company. Clients were retained. And the directors moved on without personal disaster. And that's, for me, is what a controlled demolition looks like. Now, the biggest lesson for these directors, it highlights three, I think. One is losing a contract can destroy even a strong business, especially if you've got too much reliance on one contract. Directors' loan accounts are not harmless, and early advice changes everything. Because if they'd have waited, HMRC would have forced the issue. The official receiver will pursue directors' loan accounts more aggressively than a voluntary liquidation. Now, that's not to say that an insolvency practitioner won't pursue them aggressively. They will, but I believe, my opinion is they have more commerciality about them. And if they'd have been wound up, the personal outcomes would have been much worse. Now, this construction business didn't fail because the directors were idiots, okay, or reckless. It failed because something outside of their control went wrong. But the outcome was controlled. And it's because they acted early and they got the right advice. So, if you want to find out more about pre-pack liquidations and pre-pack administrations, I want you to go over there. I want you to go over there and watch that video. It'll tell you everything. It'll tell you about selling business before you appoint an insolvency practitioner. It'll be telling you about administration.